there were signs starting off right in our marriage, right from the beginning, that I didn't pay attention to, nor did I even know to look for them. And I was dealing with paranoia, um, lack of communication. There was just a whole gamut, and I kept searching, kind of Googling, trying to figure this out. And it wasn't until the 28th year of marriage when he actually admitted he had depression, and we started going in and dealing with it. And I just thought, oh, we're going to get help for this. We're going to, because at this point I'm in at the counselor's once a month trying to make sense of it all. Not that he would go because there was nothing wrong with him. And he would say, "Why are you going?" And I said, "We've got a terrible marriage. I want to have a future. I want to have a retirement with you." But he never would participate. It was all my problem. And so that's how it started. And once I had a name for it, I didn't know what the doctor had said he suspected he had this, but he needed to be assessed, and he would never go for assessment. So the doctor had me coming in once a month and explaining everything that was going on the farm. And that's when he said, "I suspect he's NPD." And I didn't know those terms. I had no idea what that all entailed. We did talk about bipolar and some other mental illnesses, but I think the doctor nailed it right on the head without even an assessment, because that afternoon I'm waiting to go into the counselor's office and I'm sitting in my truck and I Googled it, and I literally broke down crying. It wasn't one or two traits, it was all of them, and dealing with them on a consistent basis every day. And when we were in the doctor's office, he had him fill out a questionnaire. And as he's filling it out, he's saying, "Caty, this isn't looking good." And I said, "I don't care. We're here for help. Let's get this fixed." And the first thing the doctor said when he read his results, he looked at me and he said, "Have you ever felt threatened for your life?" I said no, but I lied. I didn't want my husband knowing that I was scared of him. So he put him on medication, and we had to go back in 6 weeks for reassessment. We did that. And the first thing the doctor said was, "I couldn't let you leave last time without medicating you." And I just thought, 28 years living like this. And yeah, so that's when I first realized that I was what he had. And honestly, from that point on, I read and all I could and learn all I could, because there's many different types of narcissism. But I came to the conclusion that he's a malignant dark tetrad. So once I knew that, then I'm back at the counselor's office, and she said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Give me coping mechanisms so I can live with this. So, I can have a future with my husband." And at the end of the hour, she just looked at me and she said, "Avoid him. I want you to avoid him as much as possible." And I said, "He's my husband." And she said, "I'm telling you now, avoid him."
How did that make you feel hearing those words to avoid your husband after all those years of marriage?
Well, that was impossible to do. How do you avoid somebody that you're living with having a future and you've got family with? Like that wasn't even realistic. So I ended up going to a different counselor, uh, and she helped me through the whole process for over 7 years, probably about 9 years, once a month. And I had left, and she said, "It's like bringing your backpack in, unloading the bricks, and going back for another round." She said, You're going to have to do that until the divorce papers are signed. And that's what I did.
I hear your journey, and that sounds like a very scary situation to be in because this is someone that, if you look at the wedding vows, it's to better or for worse, to death do us part, all of these promises and this wonderful event of two people coming together, two families connecting, and then you realize, oh my goodness, this person has something that I don't know if I can continue along that journey with him or her. When you came face to face with the realization that this is something that this person has that is causing me this level of stress, anxiety, or whatever emotions that you're experiencing, how did you come to terms with it in your mind?
Well, actually, when you talk about the wedding vows, that was probably the hardest thing that I ever struggled with because I felt like a failure. I felt that I couldn't, I was bailing on him. I couldn't help him. And I was already in my own bedroom for 2 years at this point, and I had one of my children come into my bedroom and said, "If you don't get out of this house, you're going to be in a nursing home before you know it." I was so mentally low. And my response was, "I can't leave until I've done everything I can to help your dad." And that's the feeling, so, but then towards the end, when I realized what he had, and I started standing up and for myself and acknowledging, that's when the cruelty increased and the physical abuse increased. And I knew I had no choice but to leave for my own safety. And he started saying things like, "Caty, I want you to leave. Just leave. Think of it as an adventure." Or, "Why would you hire a lawyer unless you want more than you deserve?" And he didn't want me here. So why am I forcing a relationship that I'm getting damaged in and he doesn't want? That's how I came to terms with it.
I hear that a lot from people who are in narcissistic relationships, men and women, that eventually they feel like a sense of guilt and shame that, well, maybe I deserve this type of relationship, or maybe I'm not worthy of something better, or maybe I'm the one that's making this person treat me this way because insert reason. Are these some of the thoughts that you had when it came to why you were in this relationship from a guilt and maybe shame perspective?
Well, there's a lot to these relationships, and one of them is trauma bonding. Things are good in the beginning and everything, and then all of a sudden something happens, or you go to say something and they're ignoring you. They're not even acknowledging that you spoke. And so then you say it again, so then you're trying harder and you're thinking, "Well, what did I do wrong?" Or their response will be, "Well, think about it. Just think about it." And it was always mind games going on. And so they're putting you down and you're trying harder to get back to where it was. So over time, your self-worth goes down. You start questioning do- all your decisions. And I know we work together side by side on the farm, whether it be seeding, spraying, harvesting, hauling grain. I was out there with him doing the manual labor. And when I'm out there for a period of time, I could feel just myself slipping mentally, and I would have to pull back and try and get my confidence up again and go back out for another round.
How low was your self-worth?
Oh, terrible. I was almost at the point where I was gonna just give up and yeah, just terrible. And partway through our marriage, we had a really rocky year. He betrayed me. I felt he betrayed me, and there was a lot of fighting going on in the house. And then one of the children said, do you want me to go to school and tell everybody how much you fight? And then at this time, in our down times on the farm, I worked off the farm and I would drive to work, cry all the way there, cry all the way back, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life and how I'm going to best serve my kids. And it was at that point that I thought, no, I knew how cruel he could be and how manipulative he could be. And I was worried that if he had the kids 50% of the time, where is going to be their mindset? How is their mindset going to be? And how is the relationship with me and them going to work out in the end? So at that point, that's when I decided I have to stay in the marriage. I have to make the best of it and do the best that I can. And so I started suppressing all my emotions, my feelings, just constantly serving him. And after the kids had left and all married, and the one child came home and was working, helping us on the farm, and wanted to go into the gym. But his dad kept adding more jobs on him, more jobs, and that was so that he wouldn't go to the gym. He did that with everybody in the family. And I just said to him, just do this one more job. And then I caught myself and I looked and I said, no, you put a full day in, you go to the gym, I'll deal with your dad. But towards the end, I was enabling his behavior because I wanted to keep peace.
That is so tough. There's so many, even if you take it away from narcissists, right? Unhealthy relationships, what do you usually hear? I'm doing it for the children, want to keep the peace, right? And I wish people maybe had the information or the foresight, right, to realize your children see more than you think they see, right? What are some of the things that you realize when it came to your children seeing the dynamic of this type of relationship that you're like, oh, I thought they didn't see that, but they actually did?
Well, I'm trying to provide a good environment for them. And I'm thinking in my mind that I'm protecting them the best I can. And I felt that way. Once I left, one of the cousins that his cousins that always used to come and spend the weekends with us on the farm had commented and said, we were at your place one time for supper and something really funny happened. And all the kids looked at their dad to see if it was okay to laugh. She said, that's when I knew something was going on. And they stopped coming to the farm. She would come and visit me, and her husband would drive around and check out the area, but he would never come in and visit with Brent.
That's tough, that realization when other people see it, and then when it gets out, you're like, oh, okay, it's different.
Yeah, here, but here I thought I was doing a good job, but there's traits and everything that they're in the house and they see how their dad's treating me, and I'm not speaking up and I'm not saying because I want to keep the peace. So I only hope that I broke the cycle.
For those who are listening, Katie, when it comes to the day that you realize something is off, and then the day that you make a decision that this isn't for me anymore or my family, and then one of the most difficult days, I'm making the decision to exit this type of situation, relationship, whatever you want to call it. What are some of the emotions that you went through when you decided that I need to leave this type of arrangement?
Well, honestly, I was losing, I had no respect for him anymore. I didn't care what he thought. I was detaching from him. And I came home in December one day and I could feel it that something happened. And then that weekend, we had a Christmas party in town, and mom came out and we went in for supper and music. And then the next morning, Sunday morning, we're sitting here at the table and we're the three, Brent and my mom and I are visiting. And then he got up and left. And then he came back with his bag and said, I'm going on a holiday. Where are you going? BC. I said, have a good trip. And out the door he was. Like, well, what do you say to that, eh? And my poor mom's sitting there kind of looking around thinking, what is going on? But she never said anything. And then later on that day, I asked one of my children, I said, what happened? I said, something happened on Thursday on the farm when I was gone. I need to know. And they said, I'll never look at dad the same way. I said, I need to know so I can help. And that's when his dad threatened to shoot him and put him 10 feet under where he belonged. And so then Sunday, Brent left on holiday. Tuesday, he came back, and I confronted him Wednesday morning about it. And he just kind of looked at me and started laughing. Caty, you don't think I'd do that, do you? And I said, the words came out of your mouth. I said, so what's going through your head? So then he went right into the crying spiel. And from there, we ended up at the marriage counselors. And the second session in, she pulled me into another room and she said, you seem to understand your husband's mental condition. And I said, I do. And she said, you better figure it out for yourself because it's only going to get worse. So after that, I went to an office store. I picked up a day planner and I charted in it every day. We have Royal Canadian Mounted Police here. And so when they were called, the dates, the times, the names of the officer, what happened, what went down, everything was charted in that book because I knew once it got into the courts, it's going to be a he said, she said. So I needed evidence.
I think people forget how close of a opportunity violence is for narcissists, right? Like maybe you and I, we probably have our own issues, right? But maybe you and I, it's like it's a leap to get violent, right? For narcissists, it's a step.
Oh, most definitely. If they feel that they are losing control, that is not it's scary. And I know even after I left, there's times that he chased me and I had people messaging me, he's behind you in his vehicle or so I did have a good support system. And when I did leave, I was close to the RCMP station. So my whereabouts was kept quiet. And I also knew when I left, I needed a lawyer, my therapist, and I needed two or three good friends or family members that I could trust and tell them and just get support from them, just get the energy from them for this next go around because I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't realize how tough.
Take us through how tough it was, because I think sometimes people maybe misunderstand or downplay how tough it is to go from I'm leaving and then actually following through, considering how many people say they're going to leave and then come back.
See, and I think how I did it, like I stayed in the marriage as long as I could, trying to help him. So in my mind, I had exhausted all avenues to help him. In my mind, I knew I was done. And I put what I could in the back seat of my truck. I went into the living room where he was sitting and I said, you want me gone? I'm gone. But I'm not going to be responsible for what you do on this farm. And I drove away and I went no contact. So the only way he could reach me was by email or text. And that to me was a lifesaver.
I highly recommend that when it comes to no contact, if they're going to reach out, it's going to be through something that you can take in and say that, hey, this is what is said, this is what is being doing, right?
Yes, yes. No, that was a must going no to contact. But even at that, um, I was so impatient. I just wanted to move on with my life. I wanted to get him out. And I had one of my family members say, time is on your side. Time, they'll paint a picture for the courts. You don't have to do anything. and and I believe that that's what happened. Like for me, I wanted out. I wanted a fair division of property, and nothing was ever fair. And so finally I just, like, I offered him, you can have the all the equipment, the house, the yard, half the land. I'll take my half ton, half the land and cash, and I'll just walk away. No, when you can offer me something more, then we'll talk. So I kind of knew at that point it wasn't going to happen. And then there was a lot of games being played on the farm where he's not going to farm, and advertising the land for rent and getting the neighbors involved. And so then I'm having to camp out on the land all weekend to keep them off. And my lawyer's writing them letters. It was just nasty. Every game in the book that you could imagine, I went through.
How did it feel that you had to give up a lifestyle that you helped build in exchange for this peace and your freedom?
I was crushed. Like my retirement was going to be on the farm with the grandkids, coming out and spending the summers and doing jams and just doing the fun farm things. I was crushed. I'm living in town where I didn't want to live, and he's on the farm, and he's bringing different partners home and entertaining them in our home. Like I was just, you know, crushed. But I have to say, the first time that we ever went into court to find out whose job was what on the farm, um, I made the motion to leave. He got to rebut it, and then I got one more rebuttal against him. And I'm reading his, and I'm thinking he's lying. How do I prove that he's lying? And then it's like, Caty, you know he's gonna do this. Like, smarten up. So then it's just like I took 8 by 10 pictures to explain what I had said. And the first time ever in court, it's the judge and the two lawyers, and I'm sitting at the back of the courtroom. My lawyer looks back at me and then looks at the judge. And so the judge knew I was in court. And towards the end, the judge looked directly at me and then at my lawyer and said, I highly recommend that your client get camera surveillance. That was huge for me. That was absolutely huge. And so then I could come to the farm on days that I knew he was gone, because I still worked on the farm and I did things on the farm, but it was for my safety to make sure that he was gone. And at that point, he was driving illegally too. Um, he lost his semi license due to eyesight. And so he's driving the semi and everything. And, that puts me at liability. Like if he was in an accident or killed somebody, then, I mean, you can kiss my retirement goodbye.
That identity you talked about, living on the farm with your grandchildren coming to visit you, and you have all this big smiles and happiness. Were you grieving the loss of that type of lifestyle, of that identity that you were building towards?
Oh, absolutely. Like your identity is attached to them. You're known as Mrs. So and so, Mrs. So. And so all of a sudden, when you're on your own, you're lost. And everybody's talking about it. Like I can remember going to a funeral, sitting there with some of my friends, and this woman comes over. Okay, who is married to Brent? Who is married to Brent? And that was me. And she says, "Oh, okay." And then she walks away. So you know they're talking about you over there. And I I defended myself once when a cousin said that Brent was telling everybody I was turning the kids against him. And so the person that was spreading this, I went and I saw them and I said, "You do realize our kids aren't 13 or 14. They're 30s. They're in their 30s." I said, "And if you want to know anything about what's going on," I said, "phone me." And that seemed to end a lot of it. And I said, after that, I said, "I'm never defending myself again. It is what it is. People will think what they want. I have to move forward and I have to get my mindset proper."
You know, sometimes the story in our heads are more entertaining than the stories in reality, right, Katie? Because when you look at, let's say, social circles, right? And to your point, you're um Mrs. Terrain, Mr. Terrain, you're Mrs. Katie, Mr. Katie, whatever how you identify, because with some people they attach you to who you're with, or some people attach you to things in a job, right?
Yeah.
You're a dentist, you're a banker, whatever the case is. Now, when you go out and you are in those social circles, unfortunately, some people, because they know you that way, they're going to address you as such. So it might be a little awkward, but I find a little bit maybe heartbreaking for some people is that when they're shedding that identity because the relationship has ended, or maybe they're not at that job or something has happened, then some people will pull away. Right?
Yeah.
Did you experience that, like a shift in your social status, social circles when your relationship was ending?
Oh, totally. Totally. When you go through this whole experience, and you leave, it a few months later, I started realizing the damage done to me psychologically. And I would be in the rink waiting for my grandkids to come out of the dressing room, and I would be wanting to just break out crying and run. You've got this sense of loss, lack of self-worth, self-esteem, like you don't deserve this, you don't deserve to be, like you're a failure. It takes a lot to go through that to figure out why and to start rewiring your brain again positively.
Oh yeah, like imagine someone came to you, me, you, whomever, and they said that on July 20th, you're gonna lose identity of a wife, a mother, friends, the way people look at you on that day. That's a level of complex grief that would destroy so many people.
It's hard, and it kind of catches you off guard because you're not prepared for that. There's things when you leave that you don't think of, and you have to just take baby steps and one step at a time. And I do believe that's where the counselor steps in and walks you through it and helps you. A- Another thing that I didn't realize was when I'm in at the counselor's office, she kept saying, "Do you have stomach problems?" And I said, "No. Why are you asking me this?" And she said, "When your body's under a significant amount of strain and stress," she said, "it withholds the electrolytes going into your stomach. So you only have acid going in there." And she said, "That's how ulcers are formed." And I said, "My daughter got me on this electrolyte drink." And she said, "Well, that's probably saving your stomach."
We don't consider how leaving a relationship can affect our health.
No, no, there's so much that I learned, in at her office and how to deal with stress or stressful situations. You're going into court and you don't want to look weak or break down and cry. I learned a lot in her office.
Yeah, that's why I always find it interesting when someone, like online, for example, someone may hear your story, my story, or another story, and they say, just leave. I'm like, you haven't thought about that? Like, it's just, right? It's not as easy as like picking up like a Kleenex and being like, okay, bye everyone, and life is gonna be better afterwards, right?
Not easy. And two, financially, can you do it financially? You know?
Yeah, I know men and women that stayed in bad relationships because if they were to leave it, they'll be worse off financially. Um, And what's interesting that I found about the financial piece is that some people will say that, well, I can't leave because of finances. And of course, these days we'll get price of gas and food and everything, right? But I remember a woman telling me that I'm not going to leave because I don't want to live in a place that's not as big as this house or drive these fancy cars. And I listened to that story and I was like, there is people that have a price on their peace and happiness. Whereas if you give them the choice, right, a chaotic narcissistic marriage relationship, but they have a house, they have a car, and they have a certain level of social status. But if you over here and you give them peace and happiness, but it's a 2,000 square foot home or a condo and a used car, there's people that will say no.
I know. And I don't know if it's me or just stubbornness or whatever, but even when the children were young, I ended up going back to work part-time. And my husband didn't talk to me for 3 days. He was so mad over it. And I said, I need social interaction. I need to get off this farm. And so then he'd say, well, that's your play money. That's your play money. And I said, I'm happy with my lifestyle. I'm happy, and at the time I was driving a 72 Plymouth Fury. And I said, I don't care. If I have to work off the farm just to drive a new vehicle, it's not worth it to me because I'd rather be with my kids. So, anyways, he's like, pats my leg and says, there, Katie, this is your play money. So my point wasn't getting made. So my checks for a whole year went in to my account. And then I bought RSPs. So we're in at the accountant's and he says, did anybody purchase RSPs? And he says, no. And I said, I did. And he looked at me and I patted his leg and I said, that's my play money. So then we left the accountant's office and had to go down and buy him the same amount in RSPs. I think my point was made.
Absolutely. And I wish more people would take that to heart, saying that you don't have to put a price on your peace and your happiness. Yes, or like we talked about, right? Like you begin to form an identity with a certain lifestyle, but that doesn't mean that you can't form a new identity with a different lifestyle that's going to give you the peace and happiness that we all deserve because we're all born with value. But to have someone try to take away our value, diminish our self-worth, these are crimes that are so heinous.
You know, that's not love. Bottom line, that's not love. I wanted an ultimate love. I wanted somebody to love me unconditionally. And the hardest pill I ever swallowed through all of this was realizing that he viewed our relationship as contractual. It wasn't unconditional. And that was very hard to admit.
If you look at the love that you thought you had back then and the love that you may have now or looking for now, how different is it?
I haven't been with anybody in over 7 years. I have been concentrating on getting healthy from what I've experienced through my marriage. Now I'm at a point now where maybe someday I will be in a relationship, but I can walk into a room and I'm quieter, but I can peg a lot in that room. And this whole experience has done nothing but educate me. And I hope one day that I will have an unconditional love, but if I don't, then I don't. I'm happy with me. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And that's number one.
Does the way you perceive love is different now?
No, no, no. I'm more aware of the red flags and the fake or whatever. Um, but I've always had this deep desire for a true endless love.
I'm happy to hear that because I know sometimes we can have a bad experience and then become jaded or say there's no love in the world, but love will always start from within. And if you don't have it within, if you're not cultivating within, it's going to be hard to find it outside of you because you don't even know what love looks like.
Well, I know, and so many people when they're in a relationship and it's a bad relationship and they get out, within a year they're back dating and they're in another relationship without even going back and understanding how did that happen to me? Why was I attracted to that type of a person? And you've got to understand all of that in order to move forward to actually get what you want.
Well, that's easy because it's always the other person. It's never me. Right? It's never me.
Yeah. Hmm.
That's the part I always find funny, right? It's like, well, you have these five people that are just bad, but like, no, it's all them. But you're the common denominator. Nope. It's everybody else. But people find love and people get into relationships every day. People get married every day. So it is out there, but to your point, right? Like sometimes you have to turn the mirror inward and say, okay, what is it about me that attracted this? What is it about me that finds it attractive? And what is it about me that I need to improve on? And I think those three questions are sometimes difficult for many people to ask themselves.
Well, I think it is because one thing that the counselor had advised me to do was to journal, and I started journaling, and then I joined a writing group because I was getting relief from journaling over this whole journey, and I kept coming back to the question, why did I allow it? What happened that I got here? And so that's when I went back into my childhood to understand where my boundaries were dropped and how I ended up on the path that I am on today. And I do believe that our lives reflect our childhood. I do believe that. I believe it sets a path.
One woman shared with me that she wanted love so badly as a child because she didn't hear it growing up. It's just her parents, they would they don't they weren't they were the parents who didn't say it, and I think a lot of people from the older generation were like that. Like it's not that their parents didn't love them, right? Because there's food on the table, things like that. It's just they weren't outward saying it, but she wanted to hear it. It was her love language, right? Words of affirmation.
Yes.
So when she grew up now, she was searching for someone to tell her that they loved her. Ran into a narcissist. You're beautiful, I love you, oh my god. She got married. Narcissist behavior. She left that one. The next marriage, what does she find again? Another narcissist. Three different scenarios. And she had kids with two of them, if I remember correctly. And then it wasn't similar to you. It wasn't until she realized and says that, hey, I need to do something differently, not only for myself, but for my children, because she had a daughter and she had a son. And she didn't want the son to grow up thinking that's how men behave. And she didn't want a daughter growing up thinking that's how women should be treated. So she pinpointed from her childhood from that day that she always wanted to hear it. And this is not a slight against her mother and her father. They just showed love in a different way. But the way that she wanted it was to hear the words. And one thing that narcissists are very good at is those sweet nothings, right?
Oh, they're very good. It's amazing. You could almost see once the ring went on the finger how things changed here. It was night and day.
Let me ask you a question. Cultivating freedom, what does that mean to you?
It means putting the work in for your freedom to benefit the results.
Is that
That,
work that the person would do, or someone else
no,
outside of them?
that's inner work. In inner work, when you do inner work on yourself and you work on yourself, you're going to reap the rewards of the bountiful rewards in the fall.
What are some of those rewards, Katie?
Hmm. Well, freedom and peace are huge in my life. And boundaries. I have no problem. If something's going on or something I don't like, I will probably stay quiet, but I will walk away. It's just you learn more how to stay away from toxic environments, and you tend to go where it feeds your soul.
How are you able to cultivate the courage and the strength to develop boundaries and potentially to walk away?
By awareness. If you know the red flags, if you know the signs to watch for, you can deal with it. Like towards the end of the marriage here, I would be baited, like you could tell that he was looking for a fight or an argument and he would bait me. And I started using the gray rock method. And that is where you park all your emotions and everything in a suitcase, leave it at the door. So if he would come at you or bait you and yeah, I hear you, and then walk away. Like no emotion. He never got anything from me. And that is a lot of how I survived the last few years of my life is just gray rocking.
Let me ask you one final question, Katie, before I let you go today. I want to give you three wishes for this question.
Okay.
You can't wish for more money. You could wish for a farm. What are three things you wish people knew about the importance of boundaries and why?
How mentally devastating they can be to oneself if you don't keep your boundaries up. That is number one. And I do believe that we tolerate more than we should. If it doesn't feel right, there's no harm in walking away. No harm in walking away. And I'm a big empath. And that's probably what got me into this. But that's one thing that I said that this marriage wasn't going to destroy. They weren't going to destroy my heart.